Hey everyone, this is David Bennett. I'm a national master and here to analyze your chess games. So I have this really interesting game that was sent to me by an anonymous source. He didn't want his name to be revealed because he said that he was embarrassed by the game. I don't think he should be embarrassed by it. I mean, it was a really interesting game, and as he says here, he was just shaking off some rust. He peaked at 1621, which is like a high intermediate player, moving up towards the A level, and he said that his confidence was shaken after losing two games the previous day. And then he played this game and he ended up accepting a draw. By that point, maybe it was a reasonable decision. But there was a lot of really interesting stuff that happened to this game. And this is what I'm particularly interested in. He said, I plugged the game into the computer, but don't understand the rationale for many of the suggested moves right here. So that's really what I want to get at. I'll even use the engine. I'll use Lee Chess that we can use it on the Stockfish engine on the cloud, and we could definitely use that and benefit from it. And I can help you to understand how to use it, but at the same time, to not become overly dependent on the computer and to really be able to come up with our own evaluation. And sometimes we do need to do some coaching. We do need to do some reading. I mean, I've definitely done a lot of reading. I'll always recommend some books that you can look at. I mean, there's so much chess literature out there. But at the end of the day, we have to arrive at our own independent judgments. So hopefully I can help you kind of find that hybrid. Like I said, there's actually an essay that says, it's called Gary Kasparov is a Cyborg, if I recall. It was like some book on philosophy and chess that I picked up in the DC library. And so maybe you can say that. It's kind of this melding of human and machine. They say, Kasparov, Anand, some of those world champions were the first to really use computers and to benefit them, and also the especially when it comes to openings, using computers to find these novelties or new moves that their opponents had never found before that hadn't been used in traditional tournament games. So yeah, computers can definitely do a lot for us, but we have to make sure, I feel really strongly about that we have to make sure that we don't let the computers think for us. We have to still maintain our independent judgment. So for example, the first game, I think I didn't even use, or I used the computer for some analysis. Then when I was explaining it to you, and then the first video in the series, I don't think I had the computer running. And in the second one, I started running it, and then about halfway through, I said, no, I'm just going to cut it. I'm just going to, because I felt like I was relying too much on it. So it's this tension that we keep on having in chess, and it's kind of a microcosm for what we see in society as well. This challenges with AI, for better or for worse. But right now, I mean, it's just a matter of understanding it so we can know how to move forward. Anyway, so I'm going to get into that. I really like what he said about understanding the rationale, understanding the ideas behind the moves that the computer suggests, but most importantly, that we know what's going on in the position, and we use the computer as an aid. Um, and he said he missed a free piece or annotated the game incorrectly after move 18. Yeah, based on the PGN he gave me down here, if he did annotate it correctly, it looks like he did miss that opportunity. But hey, as he said, he was shaking off some dust, and that's totally understandable. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It was a good game, and it's really interesting. It was actually similar to a game, and this is in the Scandinavian defense that my student just showed me on Thursday, actually. So now a couple days later, we're looking at something very similar with with a really interesting sacrifice that happens with the white pieces against the Scandinavian, which I used to play a lot as black. That's actually the opening that I used to finally get me to National Master, was playing the Scandinavian with the knight f6 line. I'll show you that in a minute. And he says he accepted a draw from his opponent, and as I mentioned, that was reasonable at that point to take the draw. I think that was a sound decision. And before we get started, I do have a little news that I'm excited to share with you, so may as well jump into it. Let's see. So as you can see on my Twitter feed, I guess that's the best place to show you. So one thing is that my student Zahir, he won the District of Columbia Scholastic Cup. So he won the entire high school section. So he's the state champion of DC, and he's going on to represent DC at the Danker Tournament of High School Champions in Wisconsin. So there's us after the tournament, and I hear very happy with his well-deserved trophy, and I'm his proud coach. And by the way, he's worked with a lot of people through the years, so I'm just one of the people who's been working with him. You know, yeah, he's a really talented student, and yeah, it's just it's been an effort. A lot of people that have contributed to where he is now, and his hard work ethic that he put in to get to champion, and I got engaged, so that was pretty exciting. We went to Shenandoah National Park, and really looking forward to living my life with my fiance now. And if I go down a bit, do I have it? Some of the other champions got trophies from the tournament. Let's see. I think it's right here. Just had to get into get the YouTube out there since I just got started with the channel. And yeah, here it is. So from the tournament, I had some other students also that did really well, and one of my students who's going to go on to represent DC in the all girls invitational. Where is that? Oh, there she is. Yeah. And there's Robin Ramson, who's head of chess skills DC, and Paul Swaney, who would think ahead chess. He actually got me in touch with them when I said, hey, I want to do some volunteer work. And he's like, hey, there's this organization that could use you. And I've been there for the last couple of years working with Chess Skills DC. And it's an awesome organization. And yeah, Aya's really gone far. I think she's like heading towards 12, 1300 now, and she's pretty young, so she's really making it far. I think she's like top 30 or so in her age group. And let's jump into the game now. So let's see. So I kind of want to walk you through it again, my thinking process as I'm like to show you how I analyze the games on my own. And of course, I'm using some of the techniques that my coaches have taught me throughout the years, and just using also we're going to use the computer as assistance, but without becoming overly dependent on it, and also to look at the opening book. So again, we're really trying to get at the ideas behind the Scandinavian defense, and we're trying to get at the ideas behind what the computer says, or what we think should be the correct moves in this position. So e4, that's what our incognito student is what we'll say. That's what he played. And his opponent played d5. So this is the Scandinavian defense. I like it a lot for black because basically black is immediately challenging the white center. And so when you take, which is pretty much the best move here, then you've lost some of your center. Now, of course, after queen takes, you can quickly move your pawn to d4. You can regain some of that center. But black is just getting really active and fluid game in Scandinavian. I actually prefer, I think I mentioned the knight f6 line to bring the knight out immediately. I'll flip it around so we can see from that perspective. Oh, I don't see the button. But after knight f6, the idea is just to take back the knight and invite white to try to hold on to the pawn with c4. And then you could play c6. I actually ventured into the c5 step, which is interesting. C5 followed by e6. But I would try c6 too. And if pawn takes, knight takes. And again, speaking of Jeremy Silman, I think it's in his workbook. Yeah, in Jeremy Silman's How to Reassess Your Chess workbook, he talks about this e5 move. So I think it was knight f3, and then you can go e5 to make sure you latch onto that square on d4. Make sure white doesn't push, because if white pushes now, you can just take it with probably just the pawn, and you get your pawn back with a really good position for black here. So yeah, most of the time they won't do that. They'll just do something like maybe knight f3. That's probably the best move, and then I would just take back. I would just take back, and then I would go. Actually, I noticed that former women's world champion. I think her name is Mazuchuk, something like that. She played G6 and Bishop G7. I studied some of her games in that. It's kind of an offbeat line. It's not that common, but I liked it a lot for black. So check that out if you want to play the Scandinavian. Queen D6, Queen takes D5 and going back to D6 is also interesting. So for example, if they go knight C3 right away, kind of like what happened in the game, but if they go knight C3 right away, actually I prepared some games and did pretty well with this when I was competing in Hungary. This was a long back in like 2006 or 7. But Queen D6 worked out pretty well. Had a nice game there, and then you end up playing A6 to stop any annoying knight maneuvers. And just you castle queenside. That's the thing. Bring out your pieces quickly, and you can castle queenside and get a lot of pressure, especially if they push their pawn to D4. That's going to be a target. So we're going to get a lot of pressure in this position, which is maybe why. What should we call him? I'll call him our student, which is why our student played D3 instead of D4 because I mean it is a little scary sometimes to play D4. That pawn often gets hit pretty hard, and that's the problem with knight C3. I remember studying actually Daniel Lowinger, who's a local, he's a national master based in the DC area also, and he wrote a book called the D8. What is it? The Queen D8 Scandinavian, where the queen goes all the way back to D8 immediately, and it looks like it's really passive. I think it's actually the first recorded chess game, first recorded modern recorded chess game somewhere in the 1400s in Spain or something, if I recall. But so he gets into the history of it. It's really interesting. But it turns out it's actually really solid for black and hard for white to crack. And it turns out that he gets into the ideas about the knight on c3. It actually kind of doesn't help white that much. It often needs to move because let's say you get d4 in. Well, then again, this might be a target, and you kind of want that pawn to go to c3. So then you say, okay, fine, I won't do knight c3. I'll play d4 immediately, which is what a lot of people try and do. But then, see, Stockfish recommends even e5. And we'll look into that. But what I've done is I've always played knight c6, knight f3. We'll have to look into that. That's interesting. Maybe e5. So I've played, I think I would just do bishop g4 here, super active. And after bishop, for example, if bishop e2, then I just castle queenside. And black has this huge amount of pressure on the pawn on d4. And now, if something like c3 to try to secure the pawn, now I can definitely imagine e5 coming. Yeah, e5 is just coming real fast, and it's probably equalizing. Yeah, the thing about the Scandinavian is you can often equalize really quickly as black. And a lot of times white doesn't know all the lines because these are pretty much, if you're playing against e4, you can have your own pet variation, whether you're playing some version of the Sicilian or the Caro-Kann or the Scandinavian, you can, or one a version of E4, E5 lines, if you like the Berlin defense or something. You can have your pet variation that you play as black, and you could just memorize all the lines. Not only memorize, but remember, as I talked about in the last video, really get into the Grandmaster games. Ideally, read a book or two on that opening, just on one book on each opening you play. It should be no more than 2 or 3 books you'd have to read then. Maybe one for white, a couple for black from against e4 and d4. At least that's a good start. And just yeah, instead of being what do they say, a jack of all trades is a master of none. I mean, I think it's good to know different things, especially for blitz and stuff. But hey, I mean, again, when I finally reached that 2200, at least in USCF, and same thing when I reached it with FIDE earlier. I stuck with the same openings. To reach it with FIDE, I was just playing the dragon. That was my opening as black. I always play the dragon main line, and it worked out well. I had some good upsets with it, and with USCF, and more recently, I think it was in 2016, I was just playing Scandinavian. Well, first I did some offshoots of the dragon, and then playing Scandinavian, and it's a good opening. So you have to be careful about it. So what I'm saying is that you know knight c3 has its drawbacks, but d4 also has its drawbacks. So let's take a look at that. Let's just real quick. If you go d4, let's see, where was it? After queen takes d5, you go d4. Yeah, that e5 move. What happens? Maybe that just instantly equalizes. Because now you're threatened. You can't go knight c3 here, because the queen will just take on d4 and pick up a pawn. So the computer recommends let's just take a look and see what happens. Always play out these sample lines. Again, it doesn't mean don't take the computer at its word. It's more for it helps us explore. That's really what it should be. And then we have to be, asking the questions, kind of working backwards, and then we have to provide the meaning. And again, studying those grandmaster games, where oftentimes those plans are really obvious. Like I think Capablanca. I don't think I got into him yet, but Capablanca is perfect because his plans are so lucid. You watch his games, just go on chessgames.com, flip through all of Capablanca's games, or get Shannon's book on his end games. I love using that for myself and with my students. So just study Capablanca, and the way I see it is Capablanca may as well say to his opponent, "This is what I'm going to do to you." And people say, "Oh, you have to hide your plans." I mean, not necessarily. You can say, "This is my plan. Watch me do it." Sometimes he'll swing back and forth, a little left, right. One of his games is actually called on chessgames.com left right hook. So he'll mess with you a little bit. But for the most part, he has one plan, he sticks to it. So if you study his games, people like that, you can just really understand the ideas. So especially with an opening like the Scandinavian, I'm not sure if he played that. It's funny enough, actually, Tibiakov, the one that I mentioned for the dragon, he also came up with a lot of those queen d6 lines in the Scandinavian, which I said, hey, if Tibiakov did, I like his dragon stuff, why not try that? So yeah, check out the queen d6 lines if you're going to play for black. But anyway, right now we're talking, I mentioned the side for black, but to help out our student here, we want to look at the lines for white as well. So just to give you a little background, but let's see. So let's get into this. I'm going to try and make this video a little bit short. I went 2 hours last time. I'm passionate about it. So once I get into it, it's hard to stop. But I do want to do my students and anyone who I'm analyzing their games for, I want to do them justice. But I'll try and keep it to like half an hour. We'll see what happens. It's probably going to be 2 hours again, 3 hours. Okay, maybe 40 minutes. So after queen takes d5, knight f3. Now already I'm wondering, should you do knight c3 or d4? Because those are the moves that I usually see. Because you have to ask, is black able to stop d4? Anytime, that's another thing I'm talking about where black can equalize here. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of his opponent, basically, which is probably useful. So kind of help him play a little devil's advocate here against his own system. So if you're going to go knight f3, then you have to worry about e5 right away again, or maybe bishop g4 and then e5. The computer likes bishop g4. I like e5. I mean, let's see if it works. So again, this is again testing it out. So e5, okay, then knight c3 comes. Maybe it's premature. Let's see. So the queen c5, it's saying. What if we just go to queen d6? Let's test that out. Okay, now white strikes in the middle with d4. See, a lot of times it'll say this evaluation, like right now it's plus 0.7, for example, but that's, it's just starting its analysis. And you might play through a line, and then suddenly it's dead equal, or maybe the evaluation shifts. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. You really have to follow through on those lines, just like when you do your own calculations. Don't believe your own initial evaluation. You got to play that. You got to really play that out. Let me just make sure that we're good. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, d4. Okay, let's say we take queen e2 check. Bishop e7. This is kind of annoying. Now it's saying that white is up the equivalent of a pawn. No, not really. It's fluctuating wildly. Its evaluation. It's hard to evaluate this position. But I mean, the queen's blocking his queen's blocking his bishop here on e2. Let's say you do queen c5. That's annoying. Okay, bishop f4, threatening the knight here. So we have to go knight a6 to stop it. Okay, yeah, this does look good for white. And then white quickly castles and again puts more pressure on d4. But that's an extra pawn you hold for the time being. Really the issue is, can you get your king safe? Can you castle the black king here? After knight f6, let's say, then, oh, that's annoying. Okay, yeah, this is definitely annoying for black here after stuff like this. Well, maybe black castles kingside too. Bishop e6, knight b takes d4. Yeah, castle queenside. Okay, so it says white's up like 0.6 or something. Now plus 1. It thinks that white's a little bit better here. Yeah, it takes on e6. And then you're going to be, you're giving up the bishop pair. And we have an isolated pawn here that is subject to attack. Yeah, it's not looking good. So we go through the line. That's just a sample line. But we can see that. So I was just curious, if they go knight f3, does e5 work? And actually we could even click on the opening book. And yeah, bishop g4 is the most common move that from Lee Chess. That's from its database, which I think is pretty good. Did anyone even try E5? Interesting. Was that a draw? Yeah, gray is draw. Average rating 2416. How do they play it? So then now we'll compare that to what the computer came up with. Okay, knight c3 like we just saw. No, that was one that drew. So bishop e2 won for white. But knight c3 drew, was that 4 times? Let's see. And then there's queen. We have a few options. Like I mentioned, going back to d6. And you can see the rating if you hover over it. So 2400 played queen to e6. It's a little awkward. You're blocking the bishop on c8, but that might be doable. You got to block. You got to guard that pawn on d6, I think. So it's either queen d6 or queen a5. Now, the strongest player was a 25a2. So I would definitely want to look at if there's a grandmaster level player playing queen d6. Let's see. And I like queen d6 anyway. So let's see how the game went. So we would click on the game. Oh gosh, I think Gashimov is famous. Yeah, Gashimov's a big player. So let's see how that went. Let's see how Gashimov played with the black pieces. So we get an idea, just maybe if you're playing black here, or maybe if he's going to play knight f3, what he might expect if this e5 move. Oh, actually, there's a little analysis that comes with it. It says it's an inaccuracy. Best move was bishop g4. Okay, well, maybe that answers our question. Bishop g4, bishop e2. All right, it's already analyzed for us. I don't know whether Stockfish did that or whether it's pulled from the opening book, I suppose. That some theoretician somewhere it was published, maybe. So knight c6, and then getting ready to castle queenside, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's similar if they played d4. So after knight c6, castles queenside. Okay, knight c3, but again, don't worry about knight c3 too much. Queen tucks back to d7. I like it. Computer actually mentions queen f5, which I've done things like that before. I think there's also the book by, who is it by? It's a book on the knight f6 Scandinavian. I think it's by an Australian international master or grandmaster. It might come to me, but he has some lines with queen f5. He's done really well with it. So yeah, let me know if you know the name of that book. But it just came out a year or two ago. I was thinking about getting it. But I did a lot of preparation online and found some lines I liked and used I just looked up his games. So I just said, hey, how does he play? How did he win with it? 365chess.com. All right, queen d7, definitely recommend it. h3, bishop takes, and what it's saying, okay, maybe white's slightly better there. Yeah, I mean, white has the bishop here. But yeah, it's not too much. Black is quickly going to get his pieces out. Might even get that e5. I like to get that e5 moving if we can. We can take a stake in the center. Yeah, it seems like the computer see now it decides on it. And suddenly, see its evaluation shifting. Okay, the computer agrees with me. e5, d3, knight e7. So yeah, something like this. Black is doing well. The main thing I see for white is that white has the bishop here. That's always a positive thing if you can, not always, sorry, but if you have those open lines that you can use for the bishops, it's always something you can maybe put to use. But of course, the knights are coming in too. Oops, we're not going to give it back quick. The knights are coming in, so we can create some pressure with that. But this is, yeah, bishop g4 seems to be the way to go. So this game that we found pretty much answered it for us. But let's see that. Yeah, let's just quickly look at e5. So if his opponent had gone e5, just curious to see, because it seems like my first impression was, hey, this might just equalize relatively quickly because you're seeding the center, which he kind of did in this game, although it didn't seem to harm him too much, our student. So after knight c3, well, now black is kind of falling behind in development. It's like that rule with, don't bring out your queen too early. Well, when the queen takes d5 Scandinavian, you do bring it out early. But here you have to wonder whether, well, okay, we got 3 draws at strong levels, strong master levels. But I guess in practice, it did okay. So queen d6, that's what our grandmaster guy, I guess it's pronounced Gashimov, played. And bishop c4, knight c6. Okay, now the computer's liking white, but let's see what happened. Well, he's playing against a slightly weaker player, it looks like, at least in terms of their ratings, against Turov. Knight c6, castles, a6. Yeah, that's the idea that I did too. That seems to be pretty typical in the queen d6 lines because that knight b5 move is just so obnoxious. So a6 is often helpful. So a6. Now let me just turn off. Yeah, I'm turning it off, Stockfish. We're just going to look at the line. The point is here to look at how the grandmaster handles the position. Each move is not as relevant here. It's the setup he employs here. So a6, rook e1, bishop e7, d4. Okay, so again, just like we looked at white in the stockfish, white does get the strike in. Okay, how do we handle it? We don't take, we just go bishop g4, setting the pin. That's a pretty annoying pin, because the bishop's already moved out to c4. It would be a waste of a move for him to come back. Now he might go h3, but if he goes h3, oh, then d4 might fall. Is that what happens? No, he doesn't bother taking d4. I guess he has to worry about his uncastled king. But my point is that the knight is defending the d4 pawn. So that's why a lot of players will even play h3 sometimes as a preventive move, just to stop that annoying pin. Just like knight b5 is annoying for white, bishop g4 can be annoying, or is annoying for black, bishop g4 can be annoying for white. But we also have to determine if it's a ghost or not. So kind of like in the first game of the series with Neil Bruce's Roy Lopez, where his opponent's bishop g4 was not a big deal because the knight would remember knight bd2 to f1 to g3, stopping that. But here, I don't know. I don't think you want to play h3 and g4 and open up the king if the bishop drops back to h5. I don't think we want to do that. But he actually just took on f3. Okay, what goes on? What's happening with that? So queen takes f3. And then he just keeps developing. Oh, that's okay. It's for a tactical reason, of course, because there's a mate threat. So then, okay, we can't get too carried away with winning a pawn. Well, it's not a mate threat, sorry, but we can't. But we're gonna lose f7. That looks pretty uncomfortable. I don't think we want. Yeah, if you take with the pawn anyway, not to mention you're opening up the rook. It's very same things keep on coming up. But first of all, you gotta deal with that. The queen and the rook. Sorry, the queen and the bishop attacking f7. So we have to do knight f6. Looks like as happened in the game. And then we have, oh, is this a quick draw? We have d takes e5. Knight takes e5. Queen e2. Oh, no, it keeps going. Okay, it's just analysis there. So after d takes e5, knight takes e5. Yeah, this does look dangerous because queen e2, I mean, the pawn on b7 is hanging. The rook will be hanging after that, so the knight can't take here. There's pressure on the e file, not to mention this diagonal. And then once this bishop comes out, this rook's coming out, and this rook's so yeah, we see a lot of pressure against black's position here. And again, white has that bishop pair. So d takes e5, knight takes e5, queen e2. Well, it's funny. It's funny because in this game that comes up, there's an issue with, I think, queen takes e5 that we'll talk about. Knight takes c4. Yeah, once you kind of miss, oh, b5, huh? Seems, again, I was getting these weakening moves. I mean, it's creating weaknesses. But what's his idea? Is c5 coming immediately after that? He just castles. He clearly wants to kick the queen back. What does he have in mind here? So b5, well, I mean, he castles. Okay, they go into an endgame. Looks like it's approximately equal. Yeah, the computer evaluated it plus 0.1. So white is up 1/10 of a pawn, according to its evaluation. So yeah, it's basically an equal position. But again, I mean, those tiny weaknesses, a lot of times I'll play for that, where I'll just be the one who doesn't advance his pawns as much, like white in this position, for example. And in an endgame, you can often win games by doing that, by exploiting those. I mean, you look at like a book, by like Alekhine's, I think it's called My Great Games, like his autobiography, where he goes into his analysis on his games. I'm pretty sure I recall seeing a lot of games where he can just exploit weaknesses in an endgame. Capablanca did that all the time too. So maybe that's why a slight advantage for white, because I don't see what else there would be. I mean, black actually has more pieces out. There's more development. White has the e file, but black can challenge that. So it must be any tiny value, like that point, that 1/10 of a pawn might be because of that. That there might be some vulnerabilities on the queen's side. Little things like that do matter. Just keep that in mind. Okay, but I think it's in this case it's a draw. So bishop g5. Now interesting. He doesn't bother to worry about this this doubling of the pawns. It looks annoying to have that happen, but he just allows it to happen. And white says, okay, I'll get something out of it. So again, white has this the pawn structure advantage here, and that's why it's giving white point two now. So just a tiny edge. But look at this knight. If you can get to f5, you can anchor it in there with g4. So imagine your dream position. Silman gets into that a lot. Try to just picture what your dream position is. So my dream position here with white might be to play g4, somehow get my knight there. I don't know how, because if you go knight e2, the bishop can maybe come here and challenge it. Well, then we kick. We have to deal with that bishop on diagonal. That's a lot of arrows. But yeah, somehow my dream position would be to get here if he doesn't stop us. Probably stop us with c5. And if you go to g3, if you go from then the bishop might just chop you off. And then you take back, and you got that half open file to attack those weak pawns. So yeah, you don't want those. You don't want your double isolated pawns on a half open file. Right now it's closed. But if you move this pawn, okay, it's double pawn, but it's not as vulnerable. These are split up. They're fragmented. So okay, there's some slight vulnerabilities for black here, but it seems like it didn't harm him enough to be decisive. I do like white here though. I like the bishop, but the knight's coming in now, and it's immediately attacking. Okay, king g7. Thinks he can shore up his weaknesses. Maybe he can. Well, there you go. There it is. Knight's coming to f5. Okay. I mean, you can, at least he's provoking g4 if you really want to get your knight to f5. Says you got to play g4, which is also a weakening move, just like b5. So rook a d1. Yeah, it's natural. Now h5. And now the stockfish says that white gains more advantage. Well, probably because, again, giving the reasons behind its evaluations, I would say because, again, it's leaving this more vulnerable. You can't really get it here, but when it goes to h5, it's subject to attack pretty easily, actually. You can get your rooks on it. In any kind of end game, let's say the king moves somewhere later on, not through the pawn, but let's say they can't go through walls. But let's say later on the king comes this way, if we just have rooks left and maybe one rook and a king, you can just imagine though, that rook somehow getting over here first. So it might tie black down. Whereas white shouldn't be tied down because his pawns can fend for themselves. They can mutually support each other. So anyway, let's look at just quickly how this game ensued. The doubles of rooks. Oh, he ends up going to f4. Okay, but that pawn's under some pressure. He's hoping it'll do something, but it seems like it's not enough. Interesting. So he says, all right, if you want to take me, I'm going to undouble my pawns. And then I'm the one with that nice bishop. That bishop might dominate the knight. You know, Fischer, he loved those bishops. He often won his endgames by having a strong bishop against a weaker knight, especially if there are pawns on both sides of the board. Pawns on one side of the board, as anyone who studies endgames should know that on one side of the board favors the knight, on two sides of the board favors the bishop. Just basic endgame theory. It doesn't mean 100% of the time, but depends if there's any particular weaknesses or something. But generally speaking, so here b3. I don't know what is that? Yeah, now the computer's saying 0, and yeah, I just think that any advantage that white may have had, it kind of faded in the last few moves. Well, I guess black's active play with him. I don't know about h5, maybe. Oh, he stops knight g4. Maybe he's gaining some space. It's always a double-edged sword. But I think it was his doubling of the rooks, and then it just kind of turned out that it was interesting. He activated his king too. Okay, well, now he's threatening to fork these guys. So of course the rook just tucks back. But b3, I don't know about b3. Again, see, maybe I'm hyper defensive, but I just because I keep on getting into these weaknesses. But they matter. They do. Remember that Spassky game in the last game we looked at in game 2 with Edward? That knight coming into f6. That was nasty when Spassky did that. So king f5, rook at d2, a5. It's fun to see when you look at these openings. You could call it a tangent, but when you look at these openings, you every time you look at one of those games that we look up, we see all these different types of endgames that arise, and a lot of these endgames are based on similar structures that might come from your opening. Not to mention that you just gain knowledge of how these grandmasters are winning. It may have to do with the opening, it may not, but you're gaining a lot of knowledge while you're studying the opening. So you're not just becoming, as they say, an opening nerd. Although I kind of have a theory that maybe some people who study openings, they just want to be able to avoid time pressure. So it could be either way. But because if you know your openings really well, you get through them quickly, and then you can focus on the meat of the game in the middle game. So maybe for some people, although there are a lot of people who just love openings, but you can take a holistic approach. I always favor a holistic approach. Be flexible, be well rounded in your chess development. So A5, doubles rooks, A4. Okay. Well, that B3 pawn push allowed, it's a weakness. It's considered a weakness. By pushing, you're weakening these squares, and you're allowing yourself to be pried open with A4. So you can imagine a shift over to the A file. Does it happen? Looks like it, yeah. So he takes it. Oh, okay. I mean, black is going to get on the queen side now. Maybe black's going to start gaining some chances here. Knight b2. Interesting. No, it just liquidates. Why didn't he push? I would have probably tried to push. Knight c4 maybe. Where's the bishop? The bishop is a little loose then if it moves. Okay, I think that at this point black said, all right, let's just go for the draw. Trade down. Oh, you get a pin. That's something. But I think it's easily dealt with. He might have been playing for a win here. I mean, he's a higher rated player. Maybe he thought he could outplay his opponent. That Gashimo could win. And he can get the pawn back at will. That pawn on A2 is not going to stay there forever. So he trades. Oh, okay. Pins him. Chases the knight out. Then he picks up the pawn. Interesting. Pawn pushes. Bishop back. Check. Check. Hits the knight. Check. Okay, just lots of checks. There it is. I told you. See? H5 pawn became a weakness that was taken. Just like that B3 pawn allowed black to infiltrate on the queen side. And now C3 has a potential weakness. Right now there's two defenders on it though. Which is better, the knight or the bishop here? Well, again, you have pawns on two sides of the board, but the knight's pretty strong, I have to say. It's more active at the moment. It's actually kind of restricting any moves of the bishop. Usually it's the bishop that restricts the knight, but not here. Centralized knight is too strong. Can't be chased off of d5 so easily. Check, check, picks it up. Okay, they agree to a draw soon. Well, white makes an error. So right now, I mean, this is looking pretty good for white. He's up, it's up queen pawn. Black's got double isolated pawn. By coming here, you're allowing what's really double isolated generally does not open file. That's the worst case, as I mentioned. But because you move this way, you created a passed pawn. See, if it were here, it would be able to take the pawn. But now that it's moved here, this is home free. Move the knight and push it down. Okay, so he picks up that one. This could get dangerous though. So he's gonna lose c3, and that pawn could come quick. I mean, that's when that bishop might show its dominance. Asserts itself. Bishop takes, bishop d4, hitting f2 with the rook and the bishop. This guy's pushing soon. So yeah, black could still win this. I mean, white definitely has to be careful. King e6, knight e4. Okay, going for the defense. Okay, so immediately he couldn't take it because the knight would fork. So that's why the king comes up. And then the knight, okay, so he's not giving him the c3 pawn that easily. Trying to kick him out. Takes. What? Takes. Oh, he's just gonna go with the 3 pawns for the piece and maybe try to even win that. The computer thought it was a bad move. Best move was knight g5. I'll trust the computer most of the time on the end games in particular. They do really well in the end games for the most part. So takes. So actually giving them the passed pawn on the queen side, but now you have 3 passed pawns on the king side. Yeah, so as long as we can keep that pawn at bay for a bit, and you have 2 pieces in front of it for the time being. As long as you can keep them at bay, then those 3 pawns will win on the queen side, on the king side rather. So yeah, I don't know about knight takes c5. So he sacks it there. He didn't need to sack it. Yeah, he could have had the same thing without sacking it, right? Okay. Maybe he was so scared of that pawn on c4. It sounds like he was seeing a ghost though, because he could have waited and sacked it later, right? While still having those 3 pawns. But maybe he still thinks he could win. I don't think so. Okay, that looks like they're shuffling. They agree to withdraw. Okay, interesting. So that's what could potentially happen if black tries to equalize right away. Okay, and see now it's going to get long, right? Going to these other games, but let's but again, just to show you, so you can use leadchess.org. I'm in analysis mode, by the way. So go to tools analysis, and then you'll get to this game. Okay, so what actually happened in the game after queen takes d5, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, queen d6. So I like that move. Tibiaco favors that type of setup. h3. Okay, so he actually does that idea of preventing bishop g4, which could be annoying. Bishop f5 seems active. But you can see that, so as it unfolds, we're seeing the games did not, in practice, did not do very well for white. So where did white go astray? Was it with h3? Yeah. So you can see the percentage. Again, take it with a grain of salt, but you can see on h3 it's 23% wins for white, 54% for black. So that was the best move that black can hope for. Best situation for black, 23% draws. So, but why? It prefers d4, and I think it does have to do with the fact that you're not taking that center. It's a bit slow. You're not taking the center. I mean, d4 is the move. Bishop c4 is the move. If you're not going to play an immediate d4, bishop c4 is the way to go. Well, what happens a lot is you allow the bishop to pin you. I've seen people do this to me a lot. They'll after bishop g4, they'll try to go h4, kick it back. So for example, let's say we go bishop g4 right away. They'll try to kick it back and then get knight coming into e5. Let's see if that happens here. h3. If you go bishop h5, it does well for white. 50% wins, 50% draws. So yeah, g4 was the win. I think it was like a Shirov game that's known for that. So bishop g6. But it was d3 played by Bronikova, 2287 against Novikova. I think I've heard of her, Novikova. But d3 was played. So I think there's a tendency to want to push your pawn here, get your knight on e5. That seems to be the way to do that. There's a Shirov game just like that. Alexei Shirov, great, creative attacking player. But yeah, d3. This is worth looking at. So how to handle something like this. So what you could have done with bishop c4 instead of h3. That's worth looking at. We don't have to look into it too much in depth, but just to give you an idea of the type of setup you might take on. So let's say black does c6, reasonable. So kind of an alternative to a6 to stop knight b5, allow the queen to tuck back, maybe get the saw. The e6 and c6 setup is called the saw. So after c6 in the game was queen e2. Oh, now we have two games. See, sometimes it gets complicated. Like the database messes it up online sometimes. Not perfect, but good enough for a free database. It should get the job done. So e6 or knight bd7, both lost. Oh, look at that. So Bronikova, she played it twice, in both in 2007, and it went well for her. So she beat Novikova and Sirotkin. Sirotkin and Novikova. Okay, so what happened? She lost to they lost with black playing e6 and knight bd7. Let's see. Let's look at e6. That seems reasonable. So let's see how she won that. The knight still came into e5, just without d4 with d3. That's interesting. Queen retreated to d8. I'm not sure if it needed to. Seems okay. Oh, f4. Just going for the kill. Very uncomfortable stuff coming, because you don't want to open that up. And then now you have this queen bearing down on the king. You got this discovery, like in the Petrov defense that we talked about last time. Petrov, where you get that discovery on the king and win the queen. The other one was for checkmate, a similar knight c6 idea. So after f4, it was bishop e7, and then wow, she just really went for the kill. I mean, so the thing with this type of thing, when you have your knight on e5 and the bishop on g6, is that if you try to save the bishop with, say, h5, then they take on g6, and that can often be terrible. So for example, this would just probably be losing. After, let's say, h5, knight takes g6, and see now the h pawn is no longer there to take back, so this pawn has to take. You don't really want to generally take away from the center. So now that weakens all these squares. That F pawn was holding everything. Now it's just collapsing. White breaks in on E6, the position collapses. Um, doesn't look good. So after F4, H4, H5. So in the game, B5 was played. Okay, distracting the bishop. Let's go back, no problem. Keep our threat alive. Okay, hit the knight. Okay, we move our knight back. You still have the same threat to deal with. Knight goes to D5. Does that really stop the threat? Okay, the bishop might want to come to H4 and check, but it doesn't stop H5. So I guess she'd rather almost give up the bishop and maybe get some compensation for, I think this is the game with Sirokina, than to allow that collapse of E6. Because sometimes you'll sack a piece just to break through like that. Okay, so after H5, F6. Ah, okay. Still can't be good though. So the piece can escape, but the position collapses. Takes. Yep, I like that. Queen takes. Breaking in, hitting this, pawns in here, hitting this. Everything's, yeah, it's collapsing. So the bishop throws in a check. Bishop H4 check. King comes up, takes back. Now the rook is not hanging anymore, but the queen still collapses that. We actually went to an endgame. What's the count here? 2, 4, 6 against 3 against 5 with these two not so strong pawns on G7 and G6. Not terrible, but they're not the greatest. White has the bishop pair, and the development is approximately equal. Both need to get our knights and rooks out. But yeah, White's still a pawn in this position, and she ended up winning that game. So let's continue with the game. So H3, yeah. So another move, another improvement here. Instead of H3, you might consider Bishop C4. So that did pretty well in practice. So H3, Bishop F5. You get Bishop C4 anyway. E6, okay. Now somehow we left the database after Bishop C4. Now Black actually won this game with C6, and that's similar to the game we just saw. That seems to be the way to handle it with Black. But okay, now let's close this. So we finished the opening lines, that are book lines anyway. So after E6, now we're on our own. I say we're out of the book. So after E6, seems like a reasonable move though. Blocking the bishop, castles, C6. Okay, setting up that saw because it's like jagged on, or at least on the light squares. Don't want to walk into those. But White can take control of the dark squares here. So we've been looking at positions where White fights for the light squares. Here, I think after D4, we do want to play for those dark squares, or D3 as the other game showed. Maybe then you can kind of blunt that bishop. So D3 would make it so you don't have to worry as much about that bishop. It's a little more of a solid way. Now it's interesting though. In both of these games, in this game and in my student's game from Thursday, White played D3 in both games and actually ended up getting some kind of attack on the E file. So D3 is not necessarily it looks passive, but it's not necessarily. So rook E1, queen retreats. I don't know why that happened. What, to get the bishop to D6? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. That just doesn't make sense. That's probably why they got in trouble. Why not okay, what about bishop E7? Okay, for example, I'm curious. Let's check with Stockfish. So once in a while we can we'll check in with it. How about that? But I'm not going to leave it open. It's saying H6. Is it afraid of like the knight coming in or something? What about just bishop E7? Yeah, now it's saying that. So a slight advantage for White maybe, but this is playable. And then once a move like A4, kind of restricting D5, and White is okay. White's a little bit better, but it's a close game, very close game. So that would have been playable. But yeah, Queen C7, and then suddenly, wow. And you played it. Yeah, great job. So our student found knight to D4. And it's amazing, right? How tactical. You think there's no center that White has. It's just pure piece play. It's pure piece play against this king. And taking advantage of this X-ray. This is a pinned pawn. This bishop becomes vulnerable. So it's just pure piece play. That's interesting. So that's okay. We're getting rid of Stockfish again. All right, so knight d4. But yeah, it just seems like the position collapses here. It's really dangerous. This is interesting. So he takes on e6. So in my student's game was literally very, very similar. I think he may have been more developed though than this. He may have had his bishop already out before he sacked. But it was the same thing of sacking a piece for two pawns and a centralized black king in a sort of like this saw sort of setup. Could be from a Karo Khan, could be from a Scandinavian. They say that some people claim that Scandinavian is like an improved Karo Khan sometimes. I think it's because you don't need to play c6 to achieve that objective of d5, but it depends. The idea of c6 and d5 in the Karo Khan is that you can hold that center there, whereas with d5 you're losing, well, both players are losing the central pawn, but then white gets d4 in. So Karo Khan and Scandinavian are slightly different, but often they transpose to this saw-like structure. You get that from a Slav also, the semi-Slav or the Slav. You see all these different variations, Slav type setups. But 1904, you found it. Okay, so this is not a game to be ashamed of. I mean, I think White's doing pretty well. Okay, H3, that's not a big deal. It's interesting though. In the first game and the third game, White played H3 when they didn't need to. So keep an eye out for that. Don't rush to play H3. Ask yourself if it's really needed or if you should develop. Because your default should be what? To castle your king, develop your pieces, control the center. Back to basics, simple chess. Can't go wrong with that. So you have to prove, like I mentioned, you have to prove to yourself that the sort of unnatural moves, the unblitz-like moves, the ones you wouldn't see in a blitz game, or in a, that it wouldn't immediately occur to you, because the blitz game is just kind of like seeing natural moves. You don't have time to think. But that's why I say long think, wrong think. So sometimes that you have to prove that it's really worth it if you're going to take that time and consider those interesting moves. So otherwise, you got to go with the default. So bishop takes, and my student did knight takes, I think, but bishop takes. Yes, we were looking at how bishop takes first would have been stronger. Yeah, and this does seem pretty strong. Knight takes e6. I mean, this king, he had to do something. That bishop had to go to e7. Yeah, what was he doing? Well, he learned his lesson, I think. Well, he ended up drawing, but I think if he analyzes the game, he'll see how much trouble he was in. Okay, let's take a peek. Let's just see what the evaluation is. Yeah, it says white's winning. Oh, and I already did some evaluation. I just quickly looked at it earlier, and it already evaluated that white is much better. Yeah, white. It says white's winning up 1 or up 2 points, like as if white's up 2 pawns, even though white's down a piece for 2 pawns. But look at the activity of that knight, the rook. Just those two pieces alone are wreaking havoc on his opponent's position, and you're hitting the queen on c7. Yeah, this looks great. Queen d6. So knight c7 check. Yeah, I think I was looking at, okay, what about knight takes g7, but then the king just goes to f7. I'm not sure that does much. Now the knight looks a little vulnerable there, might get trapped. Um, so yeah, I think taking on c. No, you know what? I don't know. It's d4. It's got to be d4 because you still have the same threat. The threat is greater than the execution. Nimzovich, I'm pretty sure Nimzovich said that in my system or and elsewhere, but you have to try this. So d4. Now you still have the threat. This is coming no matter what. So let's say the king obviously wants to get off. Okay, bishop e7 wants to get off that diagonal. So here, then you walk into knight g5 if he wants to. Well, maybe rather have that than knight c7. But okay, where do you go to not be in trouble? Yeah, this is pretty bad. Okay, let's say king d7. And what I'm saying is that you can just go bishop f4 anyway. Your knight is getting to c7 and winning that rook on a8. We might lose the knight for it, but you're getting something back. In the game, he ends up with two pieces, or the rook for 2 pieces, and he has a couple of pawns too. But the rook for 2 pieces, I'd rather have the 2 pieces almost any day than a rook. Yeah, I think this is it. Again, in a really toxic situation, let's just open it up real quick, just to verify. Yeah, this is crushing. I think it says knight c7 check, but d4 looks strong, right? Let's see. Pretty sure that's strong. After, okay, so now, so king d7, that's just crushing. Bishop f4. Let's say, for example, queen b4. Okay, always the computer's making, see that now it's making a side pawn move. Okay, queen b6. Okay, so this queen is just being chased all over the board. And then c4. Okay, is d5 coming? Yeah, queen c8, d5 blasting through. You lock it up, you keep coming or what? Knight c3. So this is just the same, again, sample line. Bishop f7. So because the computer could very quickly give us an idea of how to handle a tactical situation like this. But there's a lot of analysis to do here. But clearly this king is not feeling good. And yeah, massive attack here for white. But yeah, after d4, okay, what about king f7? So that's the second branch in our tree. So not bishop f, see, we can do bishop f4 anytime we want because the knight will guard it. But it's lacking just a patient queen f3. Let's just see. Okay, that's 1.4. Bishop f4 plus 1 point plus 1. Okay, it says it likes queen f3 a lot more. Let's see why. Let's see what's so good about queen f3. So queen f3, h6, knight f4, hitting the bishop, knight a6, knight takes g6, king takes g6. Now we're weakening the light squares. Yeah, I mean it's not huge though. It's not a huge advantage. Bishop f4, queen d7. So now we have, okay, we're down a piece for 3, 6, 7, 2 pawns. So only a 1 point deficit. Some attack on the king. Yeah, and see, his evaluation shifts. So you have to really take it with a grain of salt and play it out, see what happens. Seems like it's not that good. So I think we need to stick with our bishop f4 idea. Let's go against what the computer is saying and try bishop f4. Now after queen d7, see, we can still get knight c7 in if we want. Rook e3 is possible. Yeah, now knight c7 looks pretty good. Bishop d6. Okay, we got to chop that off, and then we'll take the rook. That might be similar to the game, actually, to the continuation. Knight bd7, and then that knight's going to fall. And you're going to end up, yeah, you're going to end up with the black's going to have the 2 pieces against the. That's actually almost identical to what happened. So bishop f4 the whole d4 idea may not be a huge improvement, other than the fact that you're trying to get the bishop out, but it might transpose. He probably does that next. So after queen c7, knight comes in, good move. Sack, and I think it was. Yeah, actually, the computer just likes white after d3 here. So white's just has a good position, but sacking seems fine too. Why not go for the fun line? Just make sure it's justified. So knight c7 check, knight takes. Okay, now it looks like what is so strong about king e2? Can you see? It gives interesting lines, but then we always have to verify. Queen e2, why is that good? Are we really threatening anything? I just want to develop my bishop. I mean, what about d3? See, it's interesting how much the evaluation shifts. Why is that? Bishop e7, but what about queen e2? So if queen e2, because now if bishop e7, it looks like the knight can go to c7 and the queen can't take it. So it's sort of this sort of preventing him from going, getting out with the bishop. I mean, the knight is still in trouble, but it looks like that's a weak square. It looks like it can escape here, and I don't think bishop f5 is going to help too much, is it? Let's see. If bishop f5, so now we have time for d4. And okay, now it really threatens the knight. But now we break on the diagonal. And the best thing he has is to block with the knight. Then, of course, we escape with our knight, and we pick up the pawn, and we keep our attack going. And if king g6, that's not going to be good. The knight still escapes. But the point is we chased the king away from that square it was defending, and the knight gets to escape to e6. Okay. So again, the meaning behind the move. So why queen e2? It's a tactical line, so there's like a direct logical justification. But what is it? It's because the knight wants to go to c7, and you don't want the bishop to develop. So what does black have to do? Okay, something like king g8. Well, now we're seeing more compensation because this is awful. You have that rook in the garage again. Rook stuck in the corner of the garage, and now it's actually liking an endgame. Why not? Yeah, because you can get now that the queen takes, your knight is ready to go to c7. Bishop comes out. Can we escape with the knight? d3, and then knight c7 is what it's saying. So king f7, and then knight c7. Well, then the rook just attacks, right? What do we have here? Bishop f4. Ah, because, okay, so if the rook gets fancy and tries to take this to win this, then you just grab the knight in the process. That would be an example of, yeah, it's like a mix. Zwischenzug and Desperados came up again. Maybe someone will look it up to clarify, but it's kind of a mix of the two again. Because the rook, when you take, if you did this, the rook knows it's going to lose itself. So it gives itself up in the process, throws itself away. But it's also an in-between move. Because technically Zwischenzug is an in-between move, or I've heard it called an intermezzo. So in between recapturing, is obviously it would be silly to go ahead and recapture this when you know you're going to lose your rook. So you say, hey, you're going to take my rook, I'm going to take on f6. So I think really in this case, it's both. They're like, it's kind of like it's like a Venn diagram of, between the two, between these between Zwischenzugs and and desperados are fun chess terms. Rook takes c7. Yeah, so if rook takes c7, take on f6, knight takes, and then we just take back. And now we're up the exchange. Now, and we also picked up some pawns. So white's completely winning. He's up some pawns, and he's up the exchange. He's up like 3 points. Game over. Easy, pretty easily won endgame. Okay, so where were we? After queen e2. So that looks like the way he could have gone. d3 is fine too. But see, that fine point of stopping the bishop. So it's a way of thinking of restricting the opponent, understanding their capabilities, knowing that they're trying to get your knight, but that if you can hamper the development of the bishop, you simultaneously make it so it's hard for them to win your knight. And if that knight escapes and makes it to e6, then you're home free. Then you're up what? We have, let's do that count again. We cancel out rook for rook, bishop for bishop. Oh, went away. Rook for rook, bishop for bishop, queen for queen, knight for knight, and knight for knight, and we're up the exchange and pawns again. So big advantage for white if we can escape with the knight. But of course, if black gets that knight back, then black has the 2 pieces for the rook. So knight bd7, d3, bishop e7. Yeah, he gets it out, and now Stockfish thinks that the advantage is slight for white. Okay, I'm leaving you alone again, Stockfish. Let's just understand the position. Knight c7. See, that's the thing. I would have worked with the queen on e2, but now I'm not so sure about it. What does it do? What do you achieve? If you want to go queen f3 and bishop f4, the thing is you actually enable him to go bishop e6. So leaving the queen on d6 might even give you a tempo. So think of it like this. You had to waste a move to move your knight here. If you know you're going to lose the knight anyway, which you are at this point, you may as well just let that rook waste the move and take it himself. You gain a tempo. Instead, you're losing a tempo. Or it's kind of balancing out. You have to move. He takes. It's your move again. But you could have gained a tempo by simply developing. Maybe your queen f3 move right away. That seems fine. And you want to work with your pawns here. I mean, it reminds me of a recent game, a recent Grandmaster game. Was it against Nakamura? I think Nakamura lost that game. Maybe someone knows that game where they were. I think it was from the U.S. Championship, and White had a rook and 2 pawns against knights, and it was against Nakamura. I'm almost 100% sure. And Nakamura was just like doing everything he could, but those rooks just had the open files, and those pawns were pushing. So that was a really good example. I'm pretty sure it's from the U.S. Championship 2018 of how you can use those pieces if you have the rook against the minor pieces. Generally, again, I do prefer the minor pieces, but there are times when the rook and a couple pawns, especially 3 pawns. I think in that case it might have been 3. And those 2 pieces may not be enough, but they do give you more attacking chances. So you go to d3, bishop e7, knight c7. Yeah, I don't like that move, unfortunately. To be honest, what's an improvement? Yeah, I think your queen f3 was fine. I mean, it's a little risky to push your pawns, like doing something like a pawn storm could be interesting, but I don't think there's going to be a strong counterattack on the dark squares. So I would say white needs to complete the development first. I like the queen f3 idea. That's fine. Queen f3, bishop f4. How about double rooks? Just get your pieces out, right? Quickly get your pieces out and try to swamp the position before the development is complete in black's position. So knight c7, queen takes. Okay, now that happens. Yeah, black is doing well now. Consolidated, hitting the queen. Oh, but this was, yeah, this is where he made that mistake, if the notation's correct. Queen e2, king g8, d4. Yeah, it looks like the knight's hanging, right? At first I thought, oh, is there some trick he's playing for? Or maybe is it because are you afraid of the bishop moving? Now, yeah, there's nothing there. Just take it. Game over. So if the queens trade, look at where we're at now. I think we're up in exchange again. 4 against 4, but we have a rook for one of the bishops. And again, we have the extra pawns. So yeah, it's a much better situation than we had before. This should be a winning position, especially because we have a nice open file and the rooks are ready to just come down. That's over. Again, endgame technique, but that should be a one position. So after d4, knight goes back. Okay, you get to disrupt black's position, so it's still not terrible, but yeah, that was your opportunity. So I'm not sure what it was. This is the kind of moment just to be able to use this to benefit your game or anyone's game in general. When you have a moment like this where you don't need a coach to know that, right? We look over the game, you know you made the mistake. Only you know why you did that. It's some psychological factor at play as to why d4 was played instead of just you just played this doubling up, so you know you have power on the e file. You know that's there. Maybe it's that you just didn't think your opponent could make such an awful move as to let you take on e5. Who knows what it was? But try to think about why it was that you made or didn't make the decision to take or didn't see that. Yeah, it could have been disbelief. It could have been you moved too quickly. Who knows what it was? But only you know. So try to think about that whenever you have a really clear error that was made, a blunder. This is a blunder by not exploiting it. You can either blunder by making a big mistake or blunder by not exploiting, or at least a bad move, we'll call it, by not exploiting a mistake. Yeah, because that's a game-changing move right there. Unfortunately, I want harp on it. I know it's not fun to have made that move, but hey, you're shaking off the rust, and in future games you could hopefully take that night next time. So just that, just take a little more time and make sure that you're aware of the energy of the pieces, aware of any mistake your opponent makes. Just remember, they will make mistakes. If you play a tight game, your opponent will make mistakes. So keep your eye out like a hawk. So d4, knight f7, I would take queen c4. That seems like a good move because there's really no use. Well, for now it's pinned actually, but it's pinned whether the queen's there or not. This knight needs to move to allow the bishop to guard the rook. Slight unorganized here. Queen c4. King f8 seems to do the trick. I mean, again, you could point to a weakness now, but it's not super easy to take advantage of. We might swing the knight again, like we talked about earlier, like in that other game that was played. And the knight is looking here and here. Those are weak squares. Unfortunately, the bishop guards them. That's a strong bishop. And now that, whoops, can't get the knight. And now that d4 was played, it exposes c2, which is, I think, yeah, he can end up getting that later on. So it turns out maybe d4 could have been played in the opening to play for the control of e5, but playing for d4 here, oh, that was, well, not only was it strategically maybe not that good, it was that was the blunder. Yeah, so d4 just wasn't a good move. That was really the only move I can complain about recently, other than the knight c7 move. So again, in that decision too, that's another important point. Probably those are the two things that you can really think about from this game, in addition to just learning more about the opening that we talked about. Um, Knight c7, yeah, just a simple loss of tempo move. Maybe you thought the queen was going to c7, going away, but actually that helps black by allowing the bishop to go to d6 to wrest control of that diagonal, so that this bishop, because obviously if you go queen f3, you're the one who wants to go bishop f4 and take control of the diagonal. That's one of the key imbalances that someone talks about, is control of lines, control of files, diagonals, squares. So it's a battle across the board for all these avenues through which you can attack your opponent. So, yeah. That seems to be the way to go without queen c7. So let's see what else happened real quick. I think those were the main things. Queen e6. Now here it just doesn't make so much sense. See, you wanted to exploit this stuff earlier, but again, it's kind of like too little too late now. Because the queen doesn't, it looks scary, but the bishop can just go back anytime it wants, right? Yeah, this rook can expose here. Anytime black wants, they could do that because the bishop guards, everything's guarding, knight guards. Yeah, this is guarded by the bishop as well. So I'm not sure, unless your idea was to swing, perhaps to swing this way, and then shove your pawn down the board. You might open some things up. Maybe. Yeah, this might be the time when you want to throw your kingside pawns. I mean, you need to come up with a plan here. Queen e6 was definitely not a plan. I don't think so. It just seems a bit awkward. This is a more, but f4 is just weakening e4. See, again, that weaknesses, right? Well, weakens f4, not to mention, I mean, once that knight moves, the f4 pawn itself is subject to attack on the diagonal, which the bishop can join in on. So I'm not sure f4 is the way to go. And g4 can't be the way either because that still weakens f4 even further. Yeah, so again, it's these pawn weaknesses that make it a bit difficult, especially with black's bishop here. If you get too porous in here, oh, I've seen so many games, and I've played some nice games where my bishops enter on those porous squares. So yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not so sure. What's the best plan? I think just double up, but not with the queen, with the rook. Probably just rook e1. Rook a e1. And your rook lift idea. You got rook e3 and a couple moves. But after being attacked, yeah, maybe the rook lift idea earlier. You could play that now. Swing to f3, hit f6. Try to create some tactical possibilities maybe. Get that knight in. How can the knight get in the game? Ah, what about going to f4? So you don't want that to be your weakness. You want that's their weakness. Look at that. You can go g3 to secure it. Maybe you can shift your pawns a bit. There's some tightening moves. You do something like this. Knight e2 to f4. Look at that. Imagine a new setup. So you see when you watch a lot of Grandmaster games, you see them do things like that, like in positions like this. I like to call it tightening the screws. The main move I think of for that is Fischer's B3 in Game 6 of the World Championship against Spassky, where when he plays, I'm pretty sure it was Game 6, where he plays B3, a beautiful game. He's just doing these tightening moves, like B3, securing I think it was securing a bishop, no pawns were loose, no nothing. But the pawn was like working together with the bishop, and again, that his game of the century. That's beautiful, just the way he tightens his position. He's up 3 pieces, a rook and 2 pieces, for a queen and I think a pawn or two, but he sticks his bishop on d5 and his knight on e4 and his pawns on c6. Everything is so beautifully coordinated. The pawn on c6 also defends the pawn that goes to b5. So basically, the pawn on c6 defends everything else, like this cascading effect. So you can see a move like that kind of setup where everything is just kind of slightly, like Karpov. Karpov, apparently he made the most king moves of anyone. It's like all those prophylactic moves, those king h1s, those king b1s, and using his king actively in the endgame as he should be. So knight d6, queen e6. But yeah, so again, if you're making, this looks like a weird move, right? At least intuitively, I feel like it's a weird move. I mean, I'm not sure not to be too harsh, but I'm just saying, like, so when you see a move like that, you should say, hey, it's a weird move. So if I can justify it, sure. But if I'm going to make a weird looking move that I wouldn't play naturally in a blitz game, let's say, the standard move, which would be doubling rooks, I need to prove to myself that it's better than the standard move. That's something I came up with for myself. That really, again, that's something that really helped me getting to the master level. So, knight d6, queen e6, bishop h5. Okay, so now the rook, yeah, but then bishop d8. And now, see, this actually hurts our pawn structure, theoretically, because after the trade, this becomes a weakness, because the f pawn lost its ability to defend it. So you see, look at the difference. Earlier on, when we're like this, you can play this move anytime you want, and you're guarding that square. Once that pawn goes to here, now you can imagine the bishop shifting back, or so maybe the pawn guards it. This bishop unleashes, hitting this. The knight comes in. The queen is helping out with the attack. So suddenly, vulnerabilities that didn't previously exist So it's this sensitivity is so important. The sensitivity to the pawn structure, to the weaknesses. Um, so this could come back to get you. We'll see. Again, I think you're okay. 3, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against 1, 2. So you're up 2 pawns. You usually have to worry about those 2 pieces in the middle. It can be dangerous in the middle game. No, the 2 pieces actually against a rook. I had a nice game in the DC Chess League a couple games ago where I had two bishops against a rook, completely winning endgame. It's just over once in those types of endgames a lot of times. So it's really, yeah, that's why I like this 2 minor pieces, endgame or middle game. Queen e7. So yeah, black made that same evaluation that I did. Either black was actually he. I think our student here mentioned that his opponent offered a draw, so he was going for a draw, and he's justified. He can at least get a draw here. Yeah, he's down 2 pawns for the pieces, but I think that he's gonna, as I mentioned in the first game, in game 1 of the series, that what was it? It was some sideline where there was a rook against minor pieces, and it talked about how those minor pieces were going to pick off. I think it was like an e4 pawn. Those pawns were going to go. So after queen e7, queen takes check, bishop takes, king f2. Okay, trying to cover the center. Got to use that king in the endgame. Good. Well, that rook needs to come out too. So the second the rook went out, came out passively though to defend a pawn. Just I call it babysitting. If you have a rook that needs to babysit a pawn, you let a pawn mutually defend another pawn. You don't want a rook to have to do that. But I guess the idea would be to move your knight and then play c4. Okay. But what about knight c4? Here, putting a little pressure here, but directly hitting this, and then if b3, you could come in here and get, yeah. So there you go, case in point. Knight c4, b3, knight a3, and then black starts winning some pawns here, at least that pawn. So we got, if you win this one, I don't know. I mean, I think if black is more skillful, if they're a good endgame player, like I would play for a win with black here, because I'm pretty comfortable with my endgames. So I would definitely try. I don't care what their rating is. I'll play for a win because I love those 2 minor pieces, and probably get the bishops more active somehow. Yeah, it might boil down to a draw, but hey, you never know. You never know. I mean, you could win a rook endgame with every dead equal. It's just people a lot of times don't play well in the endgame because they're sometimes lazy and don't study the endgame. So if you want to be a really good chess player, I mean, I think it's just honest. You have to study the endgame. It's a critical part of the game. It comes up a lot and it helps you understand every aspect of the game. So for the endgame, actually, I recommend 2 books. I recommend Chernov's book on Capablanca, and I also recommend, I came across this book. Um, it's called Endgame Challenge. So it's really nice because you just do the endgame puzzles, and it has explanations as well. So it's a fun way to learn the theoretical positions in the endgame. Whereas the Capablanca one shows you how to get there in practical situations. The entire game, whole thing annotated. That was an interesting game though. There were some crazy tactics earlier. So we talked about how to play the Scandinavian for both sides. Delved into that. Looked at the opening analysis using stock or using the Lee chess open source, and that was interesting. So again, you could have played d3, but this was adventurous, and I think it was justified. And then the check. Now you could have gone d4 first, knight c7 check, take the rook, and really, if you want to hold on to the knight, that was the moment. Queen e2. That was hard to see, though. I admit it was hard to see, but that was your chance to try to hold that knight. But now you didn't need to give away the knight there, lost the tempo, and unfortunately, yeah, you could have won there. Could have been a win. So a couple of moments where you could have kept a piece or won a piece. So again, I think it's, yeah, don't feel bad about it. You're just shaking off the rust. Um, yeah, I guess just do a lot of tactics. That's always good for sharpening up. Play a lot of games. Um, analyze your games. Spend as many tournaments as you can. Just gotta. The only way to shake off the rust is to play. So who cares if you're gonna. At first, it's the long game, right? At first, you might not do so well, but you had I think 2 wins in a row or something, or 2.5 out of 3 you mentioned. So yeah, really good start. And then something happened with those 2 games. It would have been interesting to see those 2 games in a row that you said you lost. What happened psychologically there as well? Like a tournament, it's a psychological endeavor, really. Actually, I mentioned. I'd recommend this blog I wrote about how I went from 0 to 3. I think that was the one. Yeah, I lost 3 games in a row. I went from 0-3 at the Marshall or something. Let me see. So I'd recommend that one just from my own perspective. Um, yeah, it was my biggest comeback ever, but it really gets into the psychology of how you bounce back after losing. So you got a rocky shot there. And yeah, like having a winning position against an IM and screwing it up and messing that one up too. Yeah, and you can see how what I could have done, try to find what I could have done there. And then finally I came back, won 5 out of 6 after that, and ended up getting a good score in the tournament. But it was because of the things that I learned from the adversity. So yeah, chess is like, again, it's like a microcosm. It'll really test you. So think about those psychological factors. Um, and yeah, hopefully you got something out of the game, and good luck with returning to chess. I know it's been a while, but you're doing really well, and keep me posted.